Hi guys, welcome back to the Hugh Jeffries video. In this video, I'm going to be restoring and customizing this iPhone 6s Plus 128GB for my friend. It currently has a rubbish aftermarket display which is not only cracked but has bad touch, 3D touch, along with some bright spots on the display. The housing is also in poor condition as the previous owner had dropped it from a moving motorcycle. I have worked on this iPhone in a previous video to fix a few small things that were damaged when the previous owner attempted to replace that display. I have also replaced the dock connector as the headphone jack stopped working, but finally I get to do a proper full restoration on my friend's iPhone. And while I'm at it, I'm going to be installing a custom red and black housing to give this iPhone 6s Plus a unique look that the iPhone 6s never shipped with. To complete this build, I will be needing a replacement display. I'm using a refurbed Apple display, a new housing, and a waterproofing gasket, along with some other small components which I'll talk a bit about later on. Now, going back a few months, you can see here in these shots that the iPhone was expanding, and that was actually because of a bad battery. And the phone was suffering from various symptoms of a bad battery, including incredibly slow animations and system performance. You can see just simple basic menus are freezing, and if you turn the brightness all the way up, the phone would actually shut down and reboot. Sometimes it would just come up with the battery flat symbol, and this was actually when the phone was 100% charged. You can see the display was also lifting up from the bottom, so I cracked open the device and found inside what looked to be an Apple battery, but further inspection revealed that this wasn't actually an Apple battery and rather a straight up knockoff. You can usually tell that by the lack of the little piece of foam that goes over the connector of the battery. I also found underneath the battery those battery adhesive tabs which had been incorrectly applied. So I had to rip the battery violently out of the phone to remove it. Now keep in mind, this was not only a rip-off Apple battery, but it was also expanded and 100% fully charged. So probably not the smartest idea, but lithium-ion batteries are safer than you think they are. And there's people out there that say right to repair is something that shouldn't be passed as a law to manufacturers because of lithium-ion batteries being dangerous. Well, really, they're not that dangerous unless you're very uncareful with them. Either way though, I installed a new battery for my friend to use for a few months until the parts arrived. When they did arrive, I've now reopened the phone with the aftermarket display cracking some more once I was trying to remove that panel. Now the first thing I'll need to do is remove the display before attempting to remove the battery. That's a good practice to keep in mind, that way you're not going to damage the display, although we are going to be replacing this one anyway. Now when I stuck down this battery, I just used two small pieces of double-sided adhesive because I knew I'd have to take up the battery again. The only problem is I underestimated how strong this adhesive really was. It turns out it's like some industrial strength, but either way it only bent a small portion of the corner of the battery, and there's nothing really to worry about there. I tested out the battery, gave it a charge, and everything is working just fine. Now I can move on to the dock connector and start slowly transferring everything across from the old housing into the new custom red frame. When it comes to a housing replacement that requires everything to be transferred across, it's very important to organize all of your parts and screws, so when it comes time to reassemble everything, you know exactly where everything goes. Now, a nice helpful tip is that you can actually just replace individual parts at a time. For example, I'm going to remove the dock connector from the old space gray housing and then immediately put it back into the red one. That way I won't lose any of the screws or components. Now the only issue with the red frame was it was actually an extra piece of plastic down by the speaker grill which was actually blocked off. So my friend didn't actually mind and he just poked some holes, allowing the sound to be able to travel through. It's a little strange that there was this little bit of extra plastic, but in the end I managed to make everything work. Installing the Taptic engine into the red housing completes the dock connector for now. Coming back to the space grey housing, it's time to remove the logic board from the old frame I've also noticed on the board itself, it seems to be some sort of scraping across the top shield. You can see the black sticker is sort of scraped away there. So obviously somebody has tried to repair that screen and, I don't know, slipped up on a tool or something and ripped that. It doesn't look very nice, but I didn't have a new sticker to apply, so I won't be doing that for now. With the 6S Plus, there's a heap of cables and wires coming off of the logic board, including an antenna which is attached to the speaker. So when you remove the logic board, the speaker comes with it. It's very strange, and there's also a Wi-Fi antenna on the bottom of the board which you'll need to remove before taking out the board, or you could damage that. I'll also need to transfer over some button components to make the new red buttons work. Now to do this, I actually purchased some brand new replacement buttons with all of the parts I needed, so I didn't have to disassemble the phone first, and I could just get these ready for the housing. I'll need to transfer over the little retaining clip, the metal spacer, and the waterproofing gasket from the replacement buttons to my custom red buttons to install in the phone. This is a time-consuming process, and these buttons are absolutely tiny, so not only is this hard to film, but it was just hard to do in the first place. I've done this a few times now, so it's much easier than the first time I attempted it with my purple iPhone 6. Coming back to the iPhone, I found a hidden screw for the Wi-Fi antenna which needs to be removed, so I can take that out of the phone, and then I can take out the rear-facing camera and bracket. I did also notice when removing the logic board that the NFC antenna wasn't actually screwed in and had a missing screw, and my friend had reported issues with Apple Pay, so that would be related to that antenna not actually being screwed down to anything. So I'll actually be fixing that later on, so he'll have working NFC and Apple Pay. I'll need to transfer across these flex cables, which are for the volume and power button, as well as LED flash and microphone. Now, alignment with the mute switch on the iPhone 6S is much easier than previous generations, as it actually clips into the bracket itself on the flex cable, so when you assemble it, it's automatically lined up, which makes it always work. Now, it's also a good time to test out the buttons to make sure they're working correctly. Otherwise, you might assemble the device to only find out that the buttons aren't clicking correctly, and that means you'd have to disassemble the device. Now that we've installed those, we can install the camera, its bracket, and appropriate screws. Now it's time to install the antennas back into the device. I'll also need to transfer over this little piece of metal which sits up in the top left-hand corner, which I'm assuming just connects the Wi-Fi antenna to the antenna bands on the phone. I'll need to install its screws, and then I can come across to the space gray housing and transfer over some of the really small stuff, including a piece of rubber there that has a water indicator on it. It's good to see that that is white and not red. That means the device hasn't come in contact with any liquid. And then I can proceed to move across this little gasket which goes over the SIM tray eject hole. And then finally, there's just a few metal brackets on the side here, which actually just help the display stay closed when installed. With those removed, I can install them back into the red housing. I also noticed that the Apple logo sort of looks burnt. I'm not sure why that is, but it was like that when I got the housing, so I'm not sure what's up with that. Now it's time to reinstall the logic board back into the phone itself. I'll need to connect the Wi-Fi antenna, which is located on the bottom of the logic board, which makes life a little difficult. I'll also need to feed the cables in their appropriate places. There's a little bracket on the side here for the one that runs down to the speaker, making sure to feed that under the logic board so it doesn't get caught in the SIM tray, as well as connect up some of the antennas up top and install a few brackets, a few screws, and reconnect a few connections. Moving back down to the dock connector, I can install another antenna cable and then begin installing the remaining screws and brackets for the dock portion of the phone. There's also this little organizing clip which needs to be attached to the speaker itself and tightened down to keep those wires in place. Connecting up both the antenna cables and dock we're pretty much good to go with the phone. The last piece of the puzzle for this phone is the replacement display. I took off the home button bracket and you can see just how bent up the home button is, so I'll need to fix that so that doesn't occur in the new LCD, because that can actually twist enough to rip the cable, which would not only wreck your home button but Touch ID forever. If you replace the home button, you'll get a home button functionality on the 6S but no fingerprint reading functionality, so it's important to secure that home button in correctly. Removing the metal shield, I also gave that a clean with some cleaning alcohol to remove the text that was on there. Now it's time to reassemble all of the components that we took off of the damaged low quality aftermarket display and install them on this high quality refurbished Apple panel. That means that this is an Apple display that's been cracked and has actually had a company replace the glass on the front. So we're going to be getting the best 3D touch, colors, and touch sensitivity that we can for the display. Now the home button in this phone felt very loose and actually was twisted when I removed the bracket, so it was at risk of ripping that cable. So I've actually applied a new gasket and adhesive to that home button, which will keep it in place on the display, and it'll also be much more stable and won't wobble around in the display. With that now fixed, I can reinstall the missing screw for the NFC antenna on the logic board, which should fix any Apple Pay issues that my friend was having. And now it's time to reinstall the waterproofing gasket seal on the iPhone 6S. A good thing to note here is that a lot of third-party repair shops leave out this water-resistant seal, which can allow a lot of dust to be able to get inside the device. Although the 6S isn't advertised as water resistant, it is actually indeed. I'll now need to install the new battery adhesive tabs, the correct ones for this model of iPhone, and install the battery back into the iPhone, making sure not to connect it before I connect up the display. Otherwise, you're going to be running a high chance of frying your backlight if that battery is connected. Now, after connecting up the display and installing the brackets, I can now give the phone a good clean on the inside to remove any dust or fingerprints that I've put on the device. Pressing the power button to make sure that it's still turning on, I can reinstall the display pressing it down and install 2 pentalobe screws in the bottom. Removing the plastic film allows me to install a tempered glass screen protector to prevent against scratches. And we're done. So this is it, a custom red and black iPhone 6S Plus 128 gig. Now this, like I said before, belongs to my friend and he's going to be very pleased with the outcome of his iPhone. I've taken it from a beaten up old iPhone into something that looks truly unique and is really nice. Like I said, this is 128 gigs and is running iOS 12.1.4. It now has working 3D touch, unlike before. The fingerprint reader is still working beautifully and that home button is no longer wobbling around. This iPhone 6S Plus has had just about every component replaced in it, from the LCD, housing, dock connector, battery, earpiece, and front-facing camera flex cable. So essentially this is a fully refurbished or basically brand new device. So my friend's definitely going to be happy with the outcome, given all of these issues he's had to deal with, but now he finally gets a fully restored phone, so he's going to be very pleased with that. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button and consider checking out the modded and custom tech playlist to see more videos just like this one. Also, make sure to follow me on my social media, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.